Hey, everybody. I wanted to tell you about an amazing New Testament scholar that's visiting Houston, Texas. I'm actually going. It's June 9th through 12th. It's N.T. Wright. He's going to be speaking on the book of Ephesians. N.T. Wright is one of the best New Testament scholars in the world. So it's in Houston, Texas. Go to eventbrite, BRITE.com. Do a search in Houston for N.T. Wright. And you can also join in. Once again, it's June 9th through the 12th, and it's going to be amazing.
I'm Dr. Cristina Rosetti, and you're listening to Gospel Tangents.
Best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have Dr. Cristina Rosetti back on the show. She was on earlier and we talked about fundamentalism, and we're going to do that again with her latest book, Joseph White Musser, a Mormon fundamentalist. We're going to dive into some of the theology that's unique to fundamentalists, that's different than the LDS Church. And we're also going to find out that she's going to be moving to Canada, and she says she's retiring from Mormon studies. So I think that's a terrible idea. But Cristina, we appreciate all your hard work in Mormon history, and congratulations on your upcoming wedding. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to have an amazing historian who I found out yesterday said she was retiring.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead and tell us who you are and where are you retiring from?
My name is Cristina Rosetti, and I am an assistant professor at Utah Tech University. And next week is my last week as an assistant professor of humanities.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
And people are going to want to know
finals
why.
week. I have finals week, but then I'm retiring.
Yeah? And why are you retiring being such a young person?
I know, retiring at 34. I'm getting married and moving to Canada.
Wow. Donald Trump was just too much for you? Or Joe Biden? Which one?
I mean, last time I was on with you, I think I mentioned that I had a boyfriend.
Right.
Well, now I have a fiance. It's the same person. It's the same person. And yeah, we got engaged in October and jumping ship, moving to Quebec. And there are no Mormons anywhere near where I'm going to be. And there's also
all of my Quebec listeners.
Where are you at? Because I've never seen you. I've been to Quebec now, and I'm yet to see there were Jehovah's Witness missionaries that came to the rectory once when I was there.
I'll get your address. We'll send them your way.
We're fine. Thank you. And so I mean, there's no Mormons, and I'm retiring, and it's been really interesting to tell people that, to say the least. I have talked to Jedediah Rogers at the University of Utah Press a bit about, we had been in long-standing talks on doing some kind of history of Mormon fundamentalism, and so maybe that'll happen. But other than that,
I'm going to twist your arm to keep you in here. You can still study Mormon history even as a retired professor.
I can, but will I?
I know. We'll give you we'll give you a year off, and then you'll be like, "Oh, I miss it."
I just have so much gardening to do.
Okay.
Yeah, it is an interest. I mean, I was an assistant professor for only for 2 years. The job market's rough, as everyone who's ever done it knows, and so I was very lucky. Like I want to emphasize, I was very lucky to get a tenure track position. I don't in any way take that for granted. And I wouldn't have left had it not been, I would have never gone back on the job market. I never would have done that again. But then I met a guy who I love dearly, and he's the best person I know.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving.
Well, very good. It's an interfaith marriage, right? Because you're Catholic and he's a Anglican.
He is Anglican. Yeah, he's a priest in the Anglican Church of Canada.
And you're getting married in the Anglican Church.
We are. The Anglican Bishop of Quebec is doing our wedding at one of his parishes. So my fiance has several parishes in Quebec, and so we are getting married in one of his parishes. We did the paperwork So it is valid, and it will be valid in the eyes of Rome, but which was its own experience. So
wow.
it is.
Are they ever going to get back together and just kick out King Henry VIII? And...
Probably not. I have joked many times that like I feel like I am the unification of Western Christianity. That's not true, but it has. I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of differences, of course, but we do have. Rome has something called the ordinariate, which is a path for Anglican priests to come back and become Catholic priests, even if they're married. So yes, there are married Catholic priests that were former Anglicans. So that is kind of a gesture toward reunification, but it is still someone becoming Catholic, not communion. It's not like an act of communion.
Right.
So unlikely, but I mean, I'm staying Catholic.
Right.
So no spoilers on that. I'm not changing my religion.
There's not a lot of difference between Anglicans and Catholics, are there?
Well, we believe in the Pope, Rick.
Well, besides that, other than that.
Yeah, I mean, there's differences.
There's some other ones? Okay.
There's differences. I mean, yes, there are differences. The average person probably wouldn't care what those differences are, but there are differences.
Okay. All right. Well, we talked about Catholicism last time, so. But the reason we're here is to talk about your new book. So tell us about it. And who is he?
So it is a book in a series that University of Illinois did. University of Illinois did, they're called, Introductions to Mormon Thought. They're very short. They're very short books, and they highlight kind of the intellectual contribution of significant Mormon figures. And would you believe we got a fundamentalist in there?
I know.
And so we
and
snuck
a
one
lot
in.
of my listeners are going to be like, he's not a true Mormon. Or maybe he is, because we're not anymore.
I mean, he's like, he took his Mormonism to an 11.
Right.
Like, he's a Mormon. It even says it on the book cover. He's a Mormon. So that's a funny story. The book was supposed to be called Joseph White Musser, a Mormon Prophet. And would you guess that reviewer number 2 didn't like that? and so the book is called A Mormon Fundamentalist. But yeah, I mean, I was really grateful that Joe Spencer and Matthew Bowman, who edit the volume, they were interested in having an actual like diverse range of Mormons and Mormon contributors. And so I wrote a proposal for it, and they thought that it counted. And so we got it.
Nice.
And I do think that he is one of the great intellectual contributors of the 20th century. And I mean, I hopefully successfully make the argument in the book that I think that the LDS Church really kind of shaped itself in the 20th century in light of what he was doing in his own movement.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun. We've been here in St. George. I guess I just got here yesterday, but you had a conference. I wanted to come to more of it, but I couldn't. But it was fun sitting down last night with you and Brian Buchanan and a few other people. And Brian said to me, people need to understand that fundamentalist Mormon history is fascinating.
It is. It is. I mean, I think a lot of people view it as that Mormon studies is the study of the LDS Church. And then there's all those kind of like random other people. And that's not true. I mean, all the traditions help shape each other. And the LDS Church developed itself as modern Mormonism in light of these people. And these people, you can't be a fundamentalist if there's nothing you're opposing.
Right.
Like, these traditions needed each other. And so I hope people will realize that. Brian is right.
Yeah. I'm going to have to get Brian on because I should have recorded last night's conversation because it was fascinating. Like, I was proud because I can name all 6 RLDS prophets.
Ooh.
In order.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
So Joseph Smith III. I guess we should technically Joseph Smith.
So Latter-day Prophets are numbers.
Yeah, I can't do that. I still can't do that. Actually, I think I can do that for the LDS Church, but it's harder for me because I don't know the song.
Someone doesn't go to primary.
I know. Well, I did. It's just that song came out. It's newer than me. Okay. I'm too old.
Okay, fair.
But yeah, so Joseph Smith III. Is it Israel or Fred? I think it's Israel, and then Fred, and then Wallace, and then Wallace, and then Grant McMurray, Stephen Veazey, and then coming up next April, drumroll please, Stacey Cram.
Stacey, so she's not
current. She's prophet designate. So Steve Veazey's still.
Okay.
Yeah. And so after the Kirtland temple sale,
right.
Unlike our church, I can't imagine our prophet sitting down, like if the roles were reversed. But the first presidency, and Stacey's a member of the first presidency, sat down along with the presiding Bishop Rick and were like, this is why we sold the Kirtland temple. And they took questions, and I even asked two, and they answered those.
Oh, so it was like actually like a real Q&A and
a
not
real
like
Q&A.
pre-recorded questions.
Yeah, yeah. So I asked a couple questions. One of them was, because in the press release, I hadn't heard that there's just a 15-year agreement where Community of Christ can still hold meetings in the temple.
That?
Exactly. That was my question. And they were like, well, we hope they'll keep doing that.
After that, is it going to be gutted and turned into like Nauvoo, like a modern temple?
That was another question. And it'll depend who's the prophet in 15 years. They can do whatever they want. But the current thing is, well, we can do whatever we want in 15 years. But most people are saying we want to keep it the way it is. So I hope that happens.
Not that anyone's asking my opinion on what should happen to Kirtland historic sites.
That's all right. I counseled the Pope last time, so we're good.
I mean, we all do it. In my mind, I counsel the Pope all the time too. In my mind, it seems like it might be interesting to build a modern Kirtland temple and use the old one as kind of adjacent to the visitor center to kind of show people the history. And then there's also like a active temple near it in like the complex or in the vicinity or in the historic area. But just
they should have done that with Nauvoo. It would have been nice. They should have had two Nauvoo temples because originally they were supposed to be 24.
Do you want them to look the same?
The outside can look the same, and the inside, I think, because the original Nauvoo temple was much like Kirtland, only bigger. They had the two identical floors with the pulpits on each end.
Right.
And then I don't remember what was on the third floor. It was probably just like Kirtland, I think.
Well, I had heard that in Nauvoo they initially wanted, or in community discussions, there was a hope that they could keep the first floor like a community or community use.
Right.
Like how it would have been when it was originally planned, and then that didn't work.
Right. So, yeah, they didn't ask my opinion either. So.
Yeah, it's weird that they didn't consult us.
I know. Can you imagine?
Weird. Me who knows zero about Kirtland. Or Nauvoo, actually.
Oh, actually, well, you were there for Sunstone Kirtland, weren't you?
I was, and I also led a tour of historic Nauvoo.
Right.
I know about Nauvoo. I know about the Nauvoo period because of polygamy.
Right.
But I actually don't know a whole lot about Kirtland, about the Kirtland period.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what I'm about. I know what I know.
Go watch my Mark Staker interview.
When I think of Mormonism is 1909 to 1954. There it is. That's the Mormons.
Is that Joseph Musser's basic time frame there?
It's his first disciplinary hearing until he dies.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I don't know a lot about the Kirtland period. And I think that's because, like, when I imagine the Kirtland period, it is so different from the Nauvoo period, certainly. I mean, everyone agrees with that. And in the Kirtland period, it still kind of looked tangentially kind of like the Methodists with a temple.
Okay.
Like, it still it looked very mainline in its whole vibe.
Right.
And then in Nauvoo, it becomes
modern
Mormonism. Like, it becomes like its own distinct, interesting, new thing. It comes into itself in Nauvoo.
Yeah. Except for in Kirtland, there was way more speaking in tongues, and then Methodists didn't do that.
That's true. That is true, and it is also interesting that Mormons don't do that now.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some Mormons that
there are some offshoots that do it.
Sure. And I'm sure there is some Mormon person listening, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe talking to you.
that is doing that.
I don't speak in tongues.
I don't know your life, but it's not like a substantive part of the tradition anymore.
Right.
Like Mormonism isn't a charismatic tradition.
You have to go to Denver Snuffer or Church of Christ Temple Lot or the Bickertonites still do
they?
quite a bit. Yeah.
The Bickertonites I think are so interesting because they're the third biggest, and I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
Which is wild, but yeah, I mean, it is Kirtland also had routine foot washing, and that's all but not as prevalent.
Right. Well, cool. Well, let's jump into your book.
All right.
How did you pick Joseph Musser to be a biographer of?
There was a couple things. He has been long-standingly kind of referred to as the father of the Mormon fundamentalist movement. In kind of the history of Mormon fundamentalism, when we imagine when it begins. Should I just tell the story of how it starts?
Yeah. Although I got a new perspective from Brian Buchanan last night, so we'll see if you match.
But Father Mormon fundamentalism, Brian and I are editing his diaries.
Okay.
Signature Books will be publishing them, so had his diaries.
So you're not done yet.
Well,
good.
It's almost done. The fact that we have his diaries is a big sell to be able to write a book. And he wrote a lot, like the really formation of the fundamentalist movement. He really developed the framework for it. And so because of that, it was the logical choice. But Mormon fundamentalism really begins in the 1920s with a bunch of men who've been excommunicated or disciplined or whatever.
So it doesn't go back to 1886 like everybody says, like the fundamentalists say.
Well, we can tell the 1886 story. So 1886, John Taylor's in hiding. Of course he is, because the federal government, like the feds are like going and looking for him and whatever.
Coming down hard on polygamy.
They're coming down hard on polygamy. And I mean, fair, because they're not stopping. Mm-hmm. And so 1886, September 27, he's in hiding in Centerville. And there's this big question of what are we going to do? And so he decides to retreat to his room to pray, as one does. And a man who later becomes a foundational figure in the fundamentalist movement, Lorin Woolley, he ends up recounting that a light shone from underneath the door. And in the morning, John Taylor comes out and part of the story is he levitated. It's my favorite part. That he was met by the resurrected Jesus Christ and Joseph Smith. And they told him that eternal covenants and eternal ordinances cannot be revoked. Now, importantly, the Revelation doesn't say anything about polygamy. It just says eternal ordinances and covenants cannot be revoked.
But that's the implication.
That means polygamy. I mean, he's praying about polygamy, so it means polygamy. The revelation happened. That happened. I mean, and we know it happened because we have it in John Taylor's hand. He was in Centerville. Also, John Taylor was ride or die for polygamy. So, like, we have many revelations that sound similar. So it's not like this was some weird fringe thing for John Taylor. That happened. What might not have happened is in 1921, Lorin Woolley is meeting with a group of kind of ragtag, excommunicated, disciplined, disenfranchised people. And he's meeting in the home of Nathaniel Baldwin, the inventor of headphones. And he starts telling them the 1886 story. And that story is really compelling to a lot of people who are disenfranchised. Joseph Musser was there that day. And he then follows it up with a second part of the story by saying, not only was there a revelation, I was ordained to continue the practice. And he tells this story.
So he sticks himself back in this story.
So Lorin Woolley starts telling people that not only was there a revelation, that John Taylor ordained men to keep the principle alive. And Lorin Woolley frames it by saying that not a generation will pass without a child born out of the principle of plural marriage. So the kind of veering away between how most historians view it and how a very faithful perspective would be is that universally everyone acknowledges that John Taylor wrote a revelation, whether you think it's from God, whatever, but a revelation was written. We know that. Whether or not ordinations happened in 1886 is a faith claim. Why do I say that? We don't have contemporary evidence for it. And no one talks about it until the 1920s. Like, it just kind of disappears. But in the 1920s, Lorin Woolley starts talking about this.
So there's a 35-year gap.
That's substantial. The other problem is Lorin Woolley has a lot of stories. Lorin Woolley, he worked in the special services. He gave Roosevelt his endowment. There's a lot of
Roosevelt?
There's a lot of stories.
Is it Teddy?
Was it Teddy Roosevelt? It's in here.
I think so, because FDR would have been later.
Yeah. What? I don't remember who it was. He gives some people their endowments. He has a lot of ideas about the world. And so they make it
Teddy was
complicated.
pretty nice to Mormons, especially during the Reed Smoot hearing.
I mean, but he also says that he ascended to and is now living the principle eternally. There's a whole thing.
Teddy is?
Yeah, whole thing.
Oh.
But Lorin Woolley has a lot of stories. The other problem with Lorin Woolley, that's maybe a bigger problem, is Lorin Woolley doesn't keep he doesn't have a diary. So we have no idea what happened at any point. John Taylor, we don't have his diary saying he ordained someone. That would be a wild ride. The George Buchanan diaries, George Buchanan supposedly was there during this ordination. So the George Buchanan diaries are now available. Turn to September 27, 1886.
It's not there.
No, and would George Buchanan have been some rogue ordinations happened? Probably not. Probably not. But for all these reasons.
Well, Joseph F. Smith would have been in that meeting, according to Woolley, right?
And I mean, Joseph F. Smith believed in polygamy.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. And he had a child with one of his plural wives during the Smoot hearings. So it's not like he was opposed to continuing the practice of polygamy. But were there rogue ordinations? I mean, that's really kind of where this story diverges from.
Okay.
And it's fine. I mean, people can.
And so fundamentalists are going to say yes. Historians are going to say no.
Yes. And I mean, there are some fundamentalists that trace their priesthood to other people, to other groups. But the Woolleyite group, the Council of Friends group, is really kind of the biggest of the claims to the fundamentalist story.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Cristina Rosetti. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about Joseph Musser's life, and I found out that he was the author of the idea that the church is independent of the priesthood.
Joseph Musser, by this point, had started to promulgate a very particular idea of the priesthood, which is interesting, that he starts to really make a compelling case that the priesthood and the church can function separately. And he's able to make a compelling case for this exact reason. Rick, what came first? The restoration of the priesthood or the establishment of the church?
Oh, this is where that argument comes from. It was the establishment of the priesthood.
It was. And Joseph Musser was the first to do this.
Okay. So that's where that argument can be traced directly to Joseph Musser.
And so I think that this is what I think is his biggest intellectual contribution to the development of fundamentalism.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.